to the fourth thesis, which is that Christianity is dangerous. I think you'll like this quote. It comes from the very first page of the book, from the preface. You write, and I have a few excerpts to read. You write, imagine with John Lennon, a world with no religion. Imagine no suicide bombers, no 9/11, no 7/7, no crusades, no witch hunts, no gunpowder plot, no Indian partition, no Israeli-Palestinian wars, no Serb-Croat Muslim massacres, no persecution of Jews as Christ killers, no Northern Ireland troubles, no honor killings, no shiny suited, bouffant-haired televangelists fleecing gullible people of their money. God wants you to give till it hurts. Imagine no Taliban to blow up ancient statues, no public beheadings of blasphemers, no flogging of female skin for the crime of showing an inch of it. You then write on page 303 that even mild and moderate religion helps to provide the climate of faith in which extremism naturally flourishes. And finally, you write on pages 307 and 308, more generally, and this applies to Christianity no less than to Islam, what is really pernicious is the practice of teaching children that faith itself is a virtue. Faith is an evil, precisely because it requires no justification and brooks no argument.
Let me come on to the thing about Christianity being dangerous. The reading from the preface, with the quote from John Lennon, imagine no Taliban and all that, that I think is self-explanatory, and I won't go into that. I think what I will do is zero in on the particular point of the third quotation, I think it was, which was about children and the evils of teaching children that certain things are true without evidence, teaching them that faith is a virtue. I would not for a moment say that all religion is bad, all religion is dangerous, or Christianity is dangerous. Certainly, only a minority of religious people are bad or do bad things. The point about teaching children that faith is a virtue is that you're teaching them that you don't have to justify what you do. You can simply shelter behind the statement, that's my faith, and you're not to question that. What I'm objecting to is the convention that we have all of us bought into, whether we are religious or not, that religious faith is something to be respected, something not to be questioned, and if somebody says that's my faith, then you simply have to respect it, tiptoe gently away and say nothing more. In most cases that's quite harmless, but if you are the kind of person who takes your faith really literally and who believes that Allah has ordered you, or it would be the will of Allah that you go and blow somebody up, then it is the fact that you were educated as a child in a madrasa to believe implicitly in the faith that you were taught and not to question it, which if you happen to be of an unstable turn of mind, or if you happen to be of a violent turn of mind, leads to the sorts of terrible acts which are done in the name of religion. I must stress again, I'm not saying that the majority of religious people do terrible acts. I am saying that faith is a terrible weapon because it justifies the performance of terrible acts, which do not have to be justified by reason or evidence. The one gift I would wish to give to any child is skepticism. Don't believe something just because you're told it. Don't believe something because it's your tradition. Don't believe something because it's in a holy book. Look for the evidence and question skeptically. And if everybody did that, we wouldn't be suffering some of the terrible things that are going on in the world at the moment.
Because I want to come to this topic about Christianity being dangerous, and I want to agree very largely with a lot of what you say, the danger of fanatical religion that fans the flames of violence. And quite frankly, I'm ashamed as a Christian of the reputation, particularly in the Middle Ages, the Crusades and so on, that they're associated with Christianity. But I'd like to point out that the perpetrators of that kind of atrocity were not following Christ, but they were actually disobeying his explicit command, because he prohibited, very famously, as you know, his followers from using physical weapons. My kingdom is not of this world, he told them. He told Pilate. And it's very interesting, to my mind, that Christ was actually put on trial for being a fanatical terrorist. That's very easy to forget, and he was publicly exonerated from the charge by the Roman procurator. Truth cannot be imposed by violence, particularly the truth that Christ had come into the world to bring a message of God's love and forgiveness. So I would agree with you, and the danger of training children to be fanatics by not allowing them to question is a very serious one. And I'm so glad that I had parents who encouraged me to think, and part and parcel of the Christian faith was that thinking. Now, you ask us to imagine with John Lennon a world without religion. Well, I'd like you to imagine with John Lennox a world without atheism, with no Stalin, with no Mao, with no Pol Pot, to name the heads of the 3 officially atheistic states. A world with no gulag, no cultural revolution, no killing fields. I think that would be a world worth imagining too. And I must say, I am very disturbed in your book by what seems to me to be an attempt to airbrush out the atrocities of the communist world. I've spent a lot of time visiting that part of the world, and I don't recognize anything that you say. Atheism was not peripheral to Marxism. For Marx, the criticism of religion was the foundation of all criticism. And so it concerns me that a scientist who's very interested in historical science in the sense of evolutionary biology unraveling history is content with a very superficial analysis of the period of the Cold War. And even more disturbed to read things like this. Even if we accept that Hitler and Stalin shared atheism, they both also had moustaches, as do Saddam Hussein. So what? Well, yes, all 3 of them had noses in common with the rest of us. But what kind of reasoning is this? We're not talking about shared characteristics in general, but the motivating ideology that drove these men to murder millions in their attempt to get rid of religion, whether Jewish, Christian, or anything else. So I'm very disturbed at your historical analysis. You write that you don't believe there's an atheist in the world who would bulldoze Mecca or Chartres or York Minster or the Cathedral of Notre Dame. But what about the thousands of churches that were demolished in Stalin's Russia and the forced transformation of them into museums? Now, I can understand why one would want to rewrite the history of the 20th century to airbrush out the role of atheism, because one could very